This is The Last Word.
Well, good evening. Tonight, we begin a new chapter here at NTV, a brand new show where facts matter, context counts, and truth does not flinch. In a world flooded with noise, spin, and half-truths, this is the show where clarity will be served. We'll sift through rhetoric and separate it from reality. We'll ask the hard questions that many would rather avoid and settle the dust on raging controversies. On this show, we'll bring you data, not drama, insight, not innuendo, and in the end, we will glean the truth and hold power to account, with evidence, not just emotion. Welcome to the inaugural edition of The Last Word. My name is James Smart, a journalist of a decade and a half, focusing on slow journalism, storytelling, and narrative building. On the show tonight and every Tuesday night going forward, we also have award-winning multimedia journalist Sharon Mumanyi, who specializes in social justice stories, veteran media personality Eric Latif, who thrives in asking the tough questions, Zaha Indimuli, an active citizen, a feminist, and a veritable Gen Z changemaker. And last but not least, Joe Ageo, a highly experienced journalist and editor who has covered key events in Kenya and around the world for more than 25 years. Each week, this panel, together with an engaged audience here in studio, and you, wherever you might be, will verify the claims, debunk the myths, and put the last word on key questions shaping our lives. Live on TV and all across our digital platforms, good evening and welcome.
This is The Last Word.
Now, to kick off this show, we begin with reflections on current affairs and the things that we see and we come across in our news. Some of those things stoke our emotions. Some of them just spark our interest. And some just keep us getting bothered. And we'd like you to share with us what's bothering you tonight. What is it that you've seen in the news that you don't like, or you like, or something that you'd like to share with us? You can share with us on our digital platforms at NTV Kenya across X, Facebook, Instagram, and even on YouTube where we're live streaming. Let me begin. I'm bothered by the ongoing preparation to transition CBE learners from grade 9 junior school to grade 10 senior school. You see, about 1.2 million children who are currently in grade 9 will be moving to new schools in 6 months. Just yesterday, June 30th, the Ministry of Education announced that it had abolished the old categories of schools from national, extra-county, county, and sub-county to a new system of clusters. National schools will now be called Cluster 1 schools. Sub-county schools will now be called Cluster 4 schools. Now, these 12 and 13-year-old children are supposed to select 12 schools, pick from 3 career pathways, and then choose 3 subject combinations to define their choice tracks from 1 to 3. That's not all. Of the 12 school choices, 9 must be boarding schools where more than 3 should be from your home county and the rest from other counties. Again, of the 12 schools, 3 must be day schools in your county. Now, does that sound confusing to you? Now, imagine how it must be for these children. Why am I bothered? I am bothered because these 1.2 million children are the guinea pig class for CBC, which is now CBE. Until December 1st, 2022, they did not know whether grade 7 would be in secondary schools or in their primary schools. And then come January 2023, they were told, go to grade 7 in your primary schools. They went an entire term without teachers as the government was scrambling to hire and post new teachers. And even these teachers were not enough. And hardly, in very many cases, many of them are still not sure what exactly they should be teaching these children. Now, with the clock running down towards December, many are not clear how they'll transition to secondary school and the 3 pathways of STEM, social sciences, and arts and sports. What are we doing to these children? Why is the Ministry of Education still seeming unsure of itself this late in the day? These children and the class behind them will one day ask us very difficult questions. What will it tell them? Honestly, that's my hot button this week. I'm Eric Latif.
My question of today, the hot button for me, has been one concern. Where is Kinyagia Ndiangui. I'm concerned about the wave of seemingly coordinated abductions, targeting activists and peaceful protesters unfolding in Kenya. The most recent and alarming case is that of Kinyagia, a 31-year-old tech professional, a blogger, a digital mobilizer, known for his bold political commentary and support of the 2025 Gen Z-led protest. His disappearance under murky and obviously extrajudicial circumstances reflects a deepening crisis of state repression against civic expression in Kenya. What we are now witnessing in this country is a rapid normalization of enforced disappearances, a tactic defined under international law as the arrest, detention, or abduction of a person by agents of the state, followed by a refusal to acknowledge the deprivation of liberty. On June 21st, 2025, plainclothed agents in unmarked vehicles stormed Kinyagia's residence in Kino, Kiambu County, forcibly entered his apartment, confiscated his electronic devices, protest materials, and legal documents before abducting him without any official warrant. His family message to his family documented the kidnapping and then pure silence. Despite public pressure and legal intervention, the Directorate of Criminal Investigation, famously known as DCI, has denied holding him, even as it admitted to recovering his belongings. The DCI Director, Mohamed Amin, says Kinyagia is a person of interest, while paradoxically denying knowledge of his whereabouts. On June 28th, the Judge Chacha of High Court ordered the police to present him in court by June 2nd, a move underscoring the gravity of constitutional violations surrounding this case. I believe digital dissent is a new battlefield. The abduction of Kinyagia exemplifies the securitization of digital protest culture. His viral protest timetable, which mobilized national attention and unified decentralized protest efforts, demonstrates the power of internet-based civic engagement. The state's response, including mass abduction, signals a fear of networked activism, where Gen Z has shifted the center of political resistance from parliament to platforms like X, TikTok, and Telegram. And the numbers are worrying, to say the least. In the last 12 months alone, at least 82 enforced disappearances have been documented. This is a staggering 720% increase compared to the last 10 years. During the Finance Bill 2024, protests alone, over 200 abductions and illegal detentions were reported. In all these cases, the victims are often youth, young women, digital organizers, many held in incommunicado without charge. Civil society reports a sharp increase in digital surveillance, cybercrime charges, and unlawful search and seizure operations. These actions actually contravenes Kenya's 2010 constitutional amendments within the Articles 25, 28, and 49. And the International Convention for the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearance, to which Kenya is a signatory. And the consequences, of course, are hate and self-censorship across youth communities, disruption of freedom of assembly and association, increased use of counterterrorism laws and cybercrime acts to prosecute peaceful protesters, weakening the judicial oversight, and of course, executive impunity. We stand at a crossroad. The silence surrounding Kinyagia's disappearance is alarming. It is not just an individual tragedy. It seems intended to be a warning to every Kenyan who dares to speak. Let the authorities do the right thing. Immediately and unconditionally release Kinyagia or present him in court, thoroughly investigate all enforced disappearances since last year, and also this digital surveillance and criminalization of protest content must come to an end. That is the only way Kenya can claim to be an honorable member of the community of civilized nations. My hot button is therefore a demand for justice for Ndiangui, justice for all the disappeared, and justice for Kenya. I am Zaha Ndimuli.
Talk about a crucial dynamic emerging within Kenya's vibrant protest movements. Many of you might recall a video from the June protest of last year where young Kenyans directly challenged prominent activist Boniface Mwangi, declaring, "You're not our leader." Why am I bringing this up? It's because this video re-emerged on X last night, stirring quite a lot of debate. Let's take a look at that video. Right. This wasn't just a rejection of leadership. It carried an implicit accusation that he was an opportunist, trying to position himself at the center of a revolution driven by the people. And by the way, I hold no brief for Boniface Mwangi. He can most definitely speak for himself. But I'm bothered by the issue because this sentiment is not isolated. It reflects a broader distrust among young people towards what they perceive as self-serving or worse, funded activists. This generation, hungry for genuine change, often views any whiff of external funding with suspicion, questioning its impact on a movement striving for transparency and freedom from manipulative control. This brings us to a critical question. Does funding inherently discredit an activist's cause, especially in a movement that champions transparency? You see, activism at its core is about driving change, and change often requires resources, running campaigns, organizing protests, providing legal aid, even just communicating with a broad audience. This all incur costs. To assume that activists should be inadvertently martyrs, operating solely on passion, is not only unrealistic, but also unsustainable. However, here's where the balance comes in. One word: transparency. This is my point. Since most activists always remind us that their fight is about accountability, they have an even higher obligation to make themselves accountable. This isn't just about avoiding suspicion or refuting claims of opportunism. It's about building trust within the very community they aim to serve. When funding is disclosed, it allows the public to assess potential biases and understand the full context of an activist's work. Of course, they say there's no free lunch, and so funding often comes with strings attached. But this is precisely why transparency is paramount. When funding is open, potential agendas can be scrutinized and challenged. It empowers the public to be the ultimate arbiter of an activist's credibility and to discern genuine commitment from mere opportunism. My submission on this is therefore a simple one. We must move beyond the simplistic binary of funded equals bad or visible equals opportunist. Let the activists come in all shapes and forms. The country needs that. But let them open the curtains on their funding. Then we can decide for ourselves what to believe about their motives. That is my hot button. I'm Sharon Momanyi.
My hot button is nothing short of a national disgrace. See, a few days ago, actually it was, the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, EACC, flagged what they say is a new trend. Imagine this: young, hopeful interns, fresh out of college, eager to learn and serve their country, being used as pawns in a dirty game of corruption. These bright minds, full of potential, are being handed the dirty work of executing fraud. According to the EACC, top county officials have devised a brand new way of siphoning your hard-earned millions from the county coffers through the inflation of interest. So this is how they do it. Instead of giving interest to individuals through their bank accounts as is required, these county officials apparently direct the interns and junior officers to get the interest in large quantities, then withdraw it in cash and hand over to them. In some cases, some junior officers have actually been used to register phony companies to win lucrative tenders. What a shame. These are young Kenyans who are beaming with energy and verve. They go to these counties. They want to learn and serve. But imagine the first lesson they get, the worst possible version of Kenya. This is not just shameful, ladies and gentlemen, it is criminal. It speaks to a county, a country, and all the spaces we are talking about that is fast declining to a moral no man's land. How did we get here, really? Have we now accepted that the counties, nay, all spaces in the country should be playgrounds for greed, where the vulnerable are exploited and the law trampled upon? What happened to the good old days when we could arrest police officers taking bribes by the roadside? I hope the EACC will do more than just mention this trend at a press conference. Let them name and shame these corrupt officials. Let them face the law. Let them go to jail. That is the least we expect, isn't it? As for the intern, please don't be a tool for corruption. When the hour of reckoning, I should say, comes, you will be on your own. If the country official threatens you for refusing to board that graft train, leave that county, go to the next and the next. Somewhere, somehow, somewhere in this great Republic of Kenya, there will be someone, some company, some government office, wherever, where you will find an honest environment to learn the right things. But even if you don't get anything, anywhere, wait it out. Your moment will come. That is my hot button this Tuesday night. My name is Joe Agayo.
Well, as you can tell, there are many, many hot button issues, and they will continue being hot. This is mine. Mine is about nuclear power. Now, for a few years now, residents of Uyombo in Kilifi County have mounted a daring opposition to the government's plan to establish a nuclear power plant in that coastal tourist area. The government says that the plan is to establish a 500 billion Kenya shillings, 1,000 megawatts plant to address the country's energy issues, facilitate industrialization, and so on and so forth. The Nuclear Power Energy Agency, NUPER, planned to build a plant there, but public participation was hurried and kept quiet, with residents saying they weren't informed. They questioned why the government was rushing such a large project and ignoring all public concerns so quickly. So the residents of Uyombo organized themselves. They demonstrated in May last year. Even before the national demonstrations began, they were predictably tear-gassed, shot at, and injured by police. But they didn't stop there. They filed a lawsuit in which they wanted the whole nuclear issue to cease. They argued in court that the process had been rushed and was flagrantly illegal, and most importantly, that the public participation was clandestine. Now, these residents have been giving the country a masterclass on how to resist the state. Again, they didn't stop there. They went ahead and filed a petition with Parliament calling for an inquiry. The petition claimed locals had little to no information about the proposed nuclear power plant and the criteria for selecting preferred sites. Now, that petition raised very serious concerns regarding health, environment, tourism development in the event of a nuclear spill. They said the country was undertaking a high-risk venture without proper legal and disaster response measures in place. So, Kenya has no capabilities for handling nuclear material or nuclear waste. The country has no legal regime for handling emergencies related to atomic power. And we certainly don't have expertise in handling radioactive material. These are very serious questions to which no one in government has attempted to respond. Instead, these last 2 weeks, the state has mastered some sort of a response. That response was to switch sites. Now, instead of Uyombo in Kilifi, we have taken the nuclear story to Siaya. I wonder why. But here's Raila Odinga, perhaps, with an explanation.
There can be no doubt that diversifying our energy sources and maintaining a clean environment are critical to our development agenda as a nation. Part of the reason this country has not been able to generate and sustain well-paying jobs is the cost of energy. A number of nations, including here in Africa, have reached the decision that the use of nuclear energy to generate electricity is one of the cornerstones of sustainable development.
Well, so not really an explanation. But look, nuclear power plants are not child's play. the health concerns alone require meticulous and serious undertaking, whether you're in Uyombo or in Siaya. Now, this is from here, but as we know, hot buttons are everywhere. I have a live audience. Let me start with the gentleman on my right. Please, your name, and what is your hot button of the issue this week?
Good evening, everyone. My name is John Otieno. I'm an aspirant in Homa Bay County. I'm aspiring to be an MCA in Homa Bay Central Ward, Homa Bay Town constituency. My hot button this week will be on the last demonstration that occurred on 25th of June. According to me, that was not a demonstration. The demonstration began peacefully, but it was infiltrated by goons. They caused mayhem, there were deaths, women were raped left, right, and center. I mean, business were looted. I have a business somewhere in Fangano Street. Along that Fangano Street, there's a place called Sianda Shopping Mall. And the other side of the place, the other side of the road, Sunbeam, where was burnt to ashes the last year. After Sunbeam, the building next to Sunbeam, it's called Room, I'm sorry. When you go to that place, even tomorrow, you will not find anything. People have gone into losses. If that is what we call, demonstration, I don't think if the country is going into the right trajectory. People are losing their property. People are losing their property every day for the name of Mandamano.
Thank you very much for that.
Thank you so much.
I can see your pain. Sorry for your loss. We'll come back to that issue.
Okay.
Gentleman on my left, what is your hot button this week? Please introduce your name and give us your hot button for the week.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Madiaz Eliza. Over the last week, we have experienced a lot of mayhem in the country. My take and my point is to encourage the government to involve the youth in pragmatic and core decision-making process in the country. This is to promote participatory democracy, whereby it aligns with its goals of unity, empowerment, national cohesion, reducing alienation, and reinforcing political stability. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your hot button.
Now, these are the hot buttons. This is The Last Word, live on NTV and also streaming live everywhere on our social media platforms on NTV, on YouTube, and Facebook, and X. And I'd like also to hear your hot button issue. You can post, and I can see very many of your comments coming in. We'll pick some of them as we go on. Now, every day we come across information. Sometimes it's information that is believable. Other times it's information that you look at and you ask yourself, is this the real information or not? How can you tell what is true and what's not true? How can you tell what's real or fake news? Now, every week in The Last Word, we shall be introducing a segment that is called NTV's Fact Check. Here's our first one.
Indeed, thanks, Eric. For our first one is very present of what has happened actually this week. So, for some good reason, or for whatever reason, the National Police is unable to differentiate between two groups of people, protesters and goons. So I want to show you an image, and I want us to, in the studio, we give you a placard, all right? So on the red, it's, if you see a goon, red. If you see a protester, green, all right? So let's try it out, okay? Look at your screens. And at home, please look at this video and this picture. All right, so let's test it. Is cameras on you? Are those goons protesters? Green, protester, red, goon. I see. All right. Fascinating. Hold on to that. Hold on to that. I think we have another video. All right? Hang on to that. Play the next video, please. All right? The same. If you see a protester in the next video, it's green. If you see a goon, it's on red. To remind you, I've seen a lot of greens, all right, in this one. All right? I'll come back to you to help me understand why would you call those people protesters and the rest goons. Let's play it now.
Personally kudili na wase wa mademonstrator ndo wao sasa ndo wao. Ndio hiyo sasa umeona? Wamekuja personally kudili na wale mademonstrators. Ni kama kuna magungs wameachiliwa wengi sana. Wakuja personally kudili na wase. So tao si kuzuri guys.
All right. Can I get 30 seconds of your views? Did you see goons and protesters?
Well, whatever I saw was goonism. Because how would you infiltrate a peaceful demonstration coming with motorbike?
Okay. All right. Ladies, gents, let's attempt to solve this national crisis of identifying between a goon and a protester. Where should we start in trying to make sense of this?
I think we need to start by understanding
what
a goon is, a definition of a goon. Perhaps.
Very well.
That's going to come from me.
Yeah, I think. Yes. Again, the difference is between a goon and a Gen Z, and as a representation of Gen Z. Well, we have to understand that goonism is a phenomenon, number one, and it's very deeply politicized. And most of the time, it's rooted in the logic of authoritarianism. But what is a goon, really? This is an individual deployed to intimidate, harass, stroke abduct, stroke assault civilians, particularly those engaged in dissent, protest, or activism. And in oppressive political systems, most of the time they function as instruments of coercion, protecting powers by silencing opposition through violence, fear, and impunity. And so it makes them a proxy face of repression. But importantly, where they exist, violence is outsourced to deny state responsibility.
Sharon?
I think also the question was goons versus legitimate protesters.
Right.
And it's important to note that there's more than just these two elements in a protest, because we've seen, we had massive looting that was reported as a headache that the police had to deal with, and the government is reporting to be a disruption of what is supposed to be otherwise peaceful protests. So the goons, as we've had from the definition, hold brief from certain masters, you know, called to disrupt whatever the cause of this protest are. There are also other elements who are just thugs and criminals who, even on a day that is not a protest day, hold this identity, you know, so are not particularly just confined to that protest. And it's important then to learn that these are different people who hold different objectives. Criminals, you know, opportunistic, taking that opportunity, you can camouflage in the... they hold the cause for themselves. They are at work, yes.
So how can you differentiate? You see, like our gentleman here who's told us, he runs a business, right, in the CBD. And on the day of Mandamano, you knew that you're running a business, and so you wanted also to feel secure. Because you'd seen last year what happened to businesses in your neighboring building, and you know what was going to happen this time. There are many businesses that engaged with youth, some of them who work for them in the shops, others who got people to come in and work, and they said, just be here so that you can protect our businesses from thugs, right? And arsonists, right? So those people who are there protecting businesses and they are armed with clubs, are they goons or?
From Zaha's explanation, this would be private police. They will be vigilantes.
Private unofficial
unofficial police.
All right, but they are not here with the intention of disrupting the demonstration.
But you see, they don't have any police code, they don't have any training, they don't know how to handle civilians. Basically, they've just been given a brief. Let nobody enter here. That means that the rules are theirs to make. And I think that's why we have, we have pretty strong people. I think some even stronger than the police in this country. But there's a reason why some people are designated as the official police, because then they have to go through a process where they have responsibility. So the duty of care they have to the people is based on the fact that we have spent time, money, all of these things, training them so that when they actually go out there, they do the right things. This is also the reason why when they don't do that, then there is hue and cry.
Hold on. These businesses have hired private security guards. These private security guards have rungus. On this day, private security guards in this building, armed with their rungus, are protecting the building. Are they vigilante or are they security?
No, if they're security that have been trained, because it's private securities, people don't just wake up and become.
Well, some do.
So then, and then there's a whole licensing thing around private security companies, and therefore the process around the people who work for them. But I wanted to just put a bit of a context to this, because I think sometimes when things like this happen, we imagine that they have just happened out of the blue. I think this is a trend that we have seen for many years. I would go back as far as one could, but think about, for example, in the 90s. I will talk about, for example, in June 1999. Zaha, I'm talking about 99.
I was an idea, but I was there.
and so we have the Reverend Timothy Njoya, who is outside of Parliament, and there is this quest for a new constitution, because the constitution that we have now, by the way, was fought for by a different generation. But now he is there, and then we have a gentleman, and I am calling him that because he's male, but he comes, his name is Shadrach. His name is Patrick Shikanda Likhotio, and he comes from a group that is called Jeshi la Mzee. Jeshi la Mzee was one of the jeshis that were in this city, and in fact, it was widely associated with the then Westlands MP Fred Gumo. He denied it most of the time, but the idea was to just go there and disrupt this thing. He grabs a club from the cops there, beats up this clergyman, respected clergyman, and also not a young man. He was basically someone who was old enough to be his father. In an African setting, that is an important distinction. But then he beats him up, and you could see him there screaming. But the police were there. They were there with their rifles and everything. They did absolutely nothing about this. Second example, which is not even in Kenya. In 2007, I'm covering the elections in Nigeria. This was an important election because for the first time, there's a civilian government handing over to a civilian government. But then, even then, we had this polling station in a city called Minna in Niger State. And so we are going around polling stations. And then we are here, and suddenly this group of people emerge from wherever, and then they come in this place, they come, they beat up everybody in the station there, and then they run away. They run away with everything, right? and lo and behold, when we went back there in that place in the evening, there were some votes that they were counting there, never mind that people had been beaten and everything taken. So this is a phenomenon, and I think as Zaha was saying, it is not a Kenyan invention. It is not a 2024, 2025 invention. It is something that has been there and is been used very meticulously by different regimes, different politicians through time.
May I ask a question? If you met those people before they entered the polling station, would you have told whether they're goons?
Because they were armed. They were coming there with things, whips and clubs. I don't think that many normal people would go to a place to vote carrying those things. Whips. Really, a vote is supposed to be very peaceful. So I think there is this idea that we can't distinguish. That might be okay for you and I, but there are people whose job it is to distinguish so that they're able to protect the good people, I think.
So here's the thing. I have members of the audience, and if I can have 30 seconds, the lady at the back, I haven't heard a lady's voice, just had at the mic. In 30 seconds, can you distinguish between a goon and a protester?
I'm Victoria Moeni. I'm Victoria Moeni, an aspirant in Makueni, Women Rep, come 2027. between a protester, that's someone who is unarmed, and if you see the street, the youths used to carry flag, water, and they wear masks because of the
tear gas.
Yeah, because of the tear gas. And now the goons, they have those sticks. They are coming to beat the Gen Zs who are protesting. Another thing, they are using motorbikes and chanting that they don't need the demonstrations. Yeah.
Fascinating. Thank you very much. The lady. I just want to listen to lady's voice. 30 seconds. Can you differentiate between a goon and a protester?
A goon and a protestant. Goons walitumwa. Goons ni hao wenye walikuja na boda. Mimi nilikuwa mmoja wao wenye nilikuwa maandamano. And mimi nilikuwa nimebeba chupa maji, mask na bendera peke yake. Alafu kuna wenye walikuwa wamekuja na mawe na rungu. So hao wa rungu ni kina nani? Juu mimi group nilikuwa nayo tu kwa na rungu. Yes.
Thank you very much. I know all of you want to contribute. This is a national inquisition. By the time we leave here, we would have known and helped our Kenyan police to differentiate between a goon and a protester. You're watching The Last Word, coming to you live from Nation Center here at NTV. Taking a short break. Don't go too far, because we come back, we'll wrap up this question of a goon versus protester.
This is The Last Word.
All right, welcome back. Now, we want to wrap this question up, but let's do it in an organized way, because we really are trying to help the National Police in identifying a goon versus a Gen Z. Now, on June 17th, protests made Nairobi a battleground between two, or some would say, as Latif argued, three distinct groups. On that day, Kenyans came out in large numbers to protest the killing of high school teacher and blogger Albert Ojwang. Many things happened that day, but of importance is that there was chaos, violence, and destruction of property. Police blamed, quote, protesters in general, and say that they're unable to distinguish between genuine protesters and goons. So let's start from the beginning of this. Nairobi Area Regional Police Commander George Seda said the following. Take a listen.
There's a lot of commotion within the town, between the persons who are with rungus and the other persons who are terming themselves to be protesters. And it was difficult also to notice who are these genuine protesters, because even their leaders, you could not differentiate.
Key to note, it was difficult to differentiate between goons and protesters. That's what he said. So let's take him at his word, right? The police team is investigating what he said, looking at plenty of pictures in the news media and on social media. So now there's plenty of video footage of crowds to observe their motivations, and their methods reveal a profound divide. This is the first thing that we know. So let's start with what we know. Legitimate protesters marched peacefully, waving Kenyan flags and carrying placards with these messages like, quote unquote, stop killing us, and justice for Albert, right? Armed with little more than, as you've heard, water bottles, scarves, smartphones to document their cause. They also chanted slogans such as Ruto must go, and called for the resignation of Deputy Inspector General Eliud Lagat, whom Ojwang had criticized online before his arrest. Okay, you can see them, their pictures there, flags, and that sort of thing. Now, the approach seemed nonviolent, grounded in a cry for accountability and systemic reform, reflecting a generation unafraid to challenge state impunity. As you can see in this video, and I'm sure in many videos on social media. So key things to remember, they are marching peacefully. The first group is seen waving flags, as we've shown you, water bottles, carrying phones, and sometimes Colgate on their eyes. And their chants are very clear. Remember that. That is very important. Okay? Now, let's introduce a different group. Now, pay attention to the differences, all right? These individuals are a little different. Now, they came to the streets on motorbikes and are armed with whips, clubs, and machetes, all right? They attacked protesters and bystanders alike, According to social media footage and eyewitnesses' accounts, dozens of masked or hooded men operated alongside police, targeting demonstrators with deliberate violence. So once again, they wear masks, caps, carry clubs. They look like they come with standardized weapons. There's a presence of motorbikes around, and most importantly, they are seen destroying public infrastructure. Let's take a look.
Tumelinda jiji. Watu waogopi wakuje sasa. Wakuje sasa. Igwe siku zote. Mbwekze tuko hapo. Mbwekze. Siku zote. Siku zote. Siku zote.
Well, there's something else. It's the chants, right? What they're saying, as you've heard, what they're saying in that video. So there's something about who pays the piper and all that jazz, who owns them, as we've heard, and what they say. Anyway, let's get back to the story, because it's very long-winded, and we are conducting a national inquisition. So we can go further. An examination of open source material on that day reveals a coordinated effort to bring these rogue actors into the city. This video, which appears to have been captured before June 17th, the day of the protests, shows what looks like the recruitment of goons for the protests. Now, we only have spent a few minutes analyzing publicly available videos and pictures, and it has always been very clear that there are two distinct groups. All right? Two. Listen to this.
Youth for you. Kijana saidie kijana mwenzake. Youth for you. Kijana saidie kijana mwenzake. Dhulumu kijana mwenzako. Dhuluma ni mbaya.
Na tunasema kama youth for youth, kijana saidie kijana mwenzako. Wewe vijana msiharibu serikali. Tuheshimu serikali. Na leo tunasema 25th watu wakutane. Mnasema ati magoons, leo mtakutana na magoons hapo tao.
Na sisi tunakuja kulinda mali ya umma na mali ya serikali ya Jamhuri ya Kenya. Hakuna kutoa hata dustbin hata moja hiyo town.
Na tunamalizia tukisema hivi, Buda ni zigzag azogo, cheza ndogo, ukileta ufala utabrashiwa seka toko.
Hapana haribu CBD.
047.
Hapana haribu CBD.
Well, there's some French there that needs interpretation. Don't get lost in that. There wasn't too difficult, wasn't it, right? So let's return again to the Nairobi Regional Police Boss, Mr. George Aseda. His assertion that it remains a mystery that the entire state machinery is unable to distinguish between genuine protesters and goons, especially on June 17th, is preposterous. Here's the fact. They were sponsored goons, especially mobilized for whatever reason. They were markedly different from genuine protesters, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is the absolute fact. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, we can go on for this, but let's move on to the absolute final word, the last word.
All right, let's go to the last word.
Yes.
Because it really is the last word. But we want to have a discussion about the question we asked at the start of this show, which was, has there been an impact since this Gen Z-led protest began in our country in 2024? Some people might say a lot earlier, but we are beginning this analysis from sometime in 2024, culminating with that June 25th march that ended up in Parliament. And we have seen bits and pieces of this on social media, on the streets from time to time, and even just last week. And now there's even talk of another one on Sabasaba and so on and so forth. And the question really is, has this had an impact? And I think this is really important because there have been a lot of things that have happened. There have been political shifts. For example, we have seen the birth of the broad-based government. We have seen a lot of talk on social media on different things. We've seen what looks like an elevated level of accountability where leaders are asked more questions. We've seen a lot of leaders scared about what the public might say, but someone says perhaps not scared enough. But then there's also the question that we have had here where there have been losses, there have been deaths, there have been abductions, there have been all these kinds of impacts that have happened, including businesses that have lost tens, some hundreds of millions of shillings in this period. So the question is, has there been an impact? And if yes, what kind of impact? If no, why? But this question cannot go too far without getting to Zaha. This is some kind of intergenerational corner, I think I should say. But Zaha...
A show within a show.
Exactly. You have been at the heart of this, and you've been on the streets, I think, as a lot of other young people have. And I think before we even attempt to answer this question, it might be important to get to a context. There is a place where these things started. What took the young people to the street, what they wanted, where are they on that journey? Because before we know why this started, how it started, what brought it about, and some of the things that the young people are looking for, I think it would be premature to even ask whether there's been an impact. So take us inside the Gen Z-led protests.
Well, unfortunately or fortunately for me, I've been in all of them where I've been in trouble almost every time. But I think it would be good to take a step back and just understand that the June 2024 protest was a bomb. It had been bulging for a very long time. Young people had already been doing things that are pushing the government towards accountability. But it would be good for us to reflect January. And in January, we had the End Femicide Kenya movement that necessarily digitally brought together Kenyans. Importantly, to call for one thing, an end to femicide in Kenya. It is crucial that we notice we also saw for the first time a country's women coming together, not only in Nairobi, where we primarily see the protests, but across the entire country. And it's important for us to also see that we saw young women at the front line pushing this narrative. Let's cross over to June, where the epitome of chaos actually began. We had young people sort of very much, because this is also an idea of us to connect our struggles. We as Kenyans are fighting the same enemy. And so June came in and the 2024 protests came, and as people are marching and we're focusing on calling out the impunity, I was unfortunately at the medical tent around Holy Family Basilica. And you can imagine you have protesters who are injured, including police officers, and I had gunshots, and we had even young kids who had secured themselves there. And with the tear gassing, and we couldn't function anymore, I decided to just, you know, since I was like, we're all gonna die anyway, unfortunately. I did my last short prayer, and then I went outside of Holy Family Basilica. And when I went outside, I found a group of cops. And I was like, this is a medical tent. I have just, I'm treating people. We're a couple of medics there. And we are not disputing who to treat. We're treating both protesters and police officers. And this gentleman literally told me, Madam, go back. We are just starting to kill a bit more. We will send them to you for you to treat them. And that for me clicked a button in my head that these fellas are not here to protect this Malia Umas I've heard from the videos. They were there specifically to kill. And that raises the question, what then becomes the work of the police? Because stretched down to this year once again, in the medical tent in Jamia, we had that huge baby shower lorry. Well, we call it baby shower to just nurse our wounds. We all know how terrible that water is. Trying to fit itself around that Jamia part, surely. And so we are sprayed again, shot at again. And the question is, we have injured Kenyans. You are a Kenyan too. Where is the humanity? And that's exactly where we are at in this country.
Interesting. And we will come and hear your thoughts about whether that has moved since 2024. And Eric, I have some ideas, but let me just come to you for a moment, because it truly is important to answer this question, is it not? Like, we have been at this, at least for the last 12 months. Zaha says even before that, January, December last year. Why is it so important, in your view, for us to settle this question of whether there has been an impact or not?
It's important for us to track whether the needle is moving. Why did the young people come out? And like Zaha is saying, this had been bubbling under for a while. What was this anger that was seething? It was seething because of the economic situation, because of the unemployment, because of all these other things that people were feeling that I am being pushed to a corner, I'm on a short tether. And yet they were looking at their government, and the government was coming at this particular point to the finance bill and saying, we'd like an extra 365 billion shillings from you. And people were saying, from where? Are you trying to milk a stone? So they were pushing for accountability, for a government that listens to the people. They were pushing for a government that takes in austerity measures and stops the opulence. The open show of opulence was angering people. Yeah. So those were the things. So when people came out into the streets, what was the cost? The cost was, according to the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, by the 25th of February this year, between June and February this year, 62 people had died as a result of participation in protests. 85 people had been abducted, and this is on forced disappearance. Not arrested formally, but just picked up, taken somewhere, locked up for days, for hours, for weeks, and then released. And many of those people to date are living with trauma. Many of the families of the 62 people are seething with anger because they're seeking justice. Businesses, many of the people in the audience here who run businesses are among those that Kenya Private Sector Alliance was saying 3 billion shillings was being lost per day during the protest period. Just the Kenya Association of Manufacturers was saying in the manufacturing sector, about 20 million shillings was being lost per day. The retail sector was saying 1.2 billion shillings was being lost per day. The transport sector was saying 1 billion shillings was being lost per day. In fact, there was vandalism of infrastructure, such as the expressway, where the then minister came and said, you know what, the cost of repairing what we've seen being vandalized on the expressway is going to be over 700 million shillings. That's the cost. Cost in property, cost in livelihoods, cost in lives. And what have we seen in return? This is a government where the president came and said, I've heard you, and I am going to cut down my Office of Advisors by 50%. I am going to institute austerity measures. I am going to change my government. He dismissed his cabinet. He reappointed most of them and included others from now the broad-based side of government. He reduced the advisors. No, he did not. He has actually hired more advisors. He has expanded the size of the cabinet, not cabinet, but the executive, by including more state departments. If you look at the austerity measures, the budget for State House alone in the financial year 2024-2025 has ballooned by 7.5 billion shillings. No, the budget was not 7.5 billion shillings. It has increased by 7.5 billion shillings. Gen Zs went to the streets and said, we want austerity. The president said, yes, I'm going to give you austerity, and increased his budget by 7.5 billion shillings. Is that impact? For me, I look back and I'm like, okay.
Okay, Sharon.
Can we get a dipstick from the audience?
Okay,
first?
that would be a good place to go.
So this is the question, and for you at home as well. Do you think that these protests, starting since June last year, has there been impact? Has anything changed? All right, you have red flags and green flag. All right, green for change, red for absolutely nada. Nothing has changed. Show me your cards. Let's see your cards. Evenly split. So let me start with the red ones. All right? Absolute red ones. Set them up to this gentleman, the gentleman on a suit, so that I can get many comments. Make it 30 seconds, your name, and why do you think has there been no change?
Okay, my name is Peter from Machakos County, aspiring to be MCA 2027.
Oh, wow.
What's happening here is blame game. The government blaming the opposition. Opposition blaming the government. Since the protest started, we have no anything we can say this came as a result of us going to demonstrations. What we have is graves. What we have is jobless young people. And what also we have, I quote, in the name of activists, most of them, they shout in the streets, tuko hapa, tunajitafutia, tuitwa na state. That's a fact number one. So to conclude the truth about it, what we have to do right now is to call for peaceful dialogue conversation, where we will come and reason together. Thank you.
All right. Gentleman with the microphone, your name, change, no change.
My name is Bernard Karanja, a student leader and an aspiring MCA in Nyandarua County, Urungaru Ward. Since we started the protests in June 2024, there has been no change at all. What you have seen is opportunists that are taking this as an advantage. Like after the 2024 protests on June, the opposition by then, that was the Azimio, they got that opportunity and went and formed the broad-based government. And we had nowhere we were included to be in that table. As the youths, we are the largest demographic in this country, and we are ready and capable and deserve a seat in the decision-making table. And so we need that opportunity. It's our time. There's no future. We have always been told, you are the future leaders. The future is now, and we can fix it. We are the Mr. and Miss Fix It. If we are given the opportunity, we will make this country a better place for everyone. And when we are given that space and the voice, they will watch this country rise. Thank you.
All right, very well done. Can I get one more comment? Give the microphone down here, and let the microphone also come there. Yes, let's start with this gentleman. Yes, you're asking for the microphone. Yeah. Quickly, your name, 30 seconds. Change, no change.
I think there is no change.
How so?
The reason is the Gen Zs are protesting. They need change, but they don't know the history of our country, because the protest has been there. The constitution they are quoting was brought by serious and radical changes. People died, and we didn't see the cry that they are talking about today. And for the government, I can say the current government is carrying the burden of the previous governments. Thank you.
Okay. Yes.
Mutegi Timothy, aspirant for the Member of Parliament, the Raka constituency. I can say on my perspective, there's a change, but a decimal change. What I can explain on that is that, for example, when you look at the perspective of the first lead office and the first lead on the issue of the governor, they were all abolished. But what the youth of this country went on the street was total change, not a decimal change. What we can say as youth, there's a small decimal that shows that there's still hope.
Can I ask you, what does total change look like for you?
Total change, for example, there was the issues that made us to go to the street. Most the 10 points, the main 10 points. But only we can say just 20% of them were implemented. But the youth needs change. For example, on the issue of corruption, this country is dying because of corruption.
Okay.
Thank you.
There are many MCAs, aspirants.
So good.
If you're a governor sitting here, you are sitting on hot buttons. There's very dangerous grounds for you. That's a good place for us to take a break. We'll come back with plenty more of this on the absolute last word. Has there been change since the Gen Z-led protest started last year? You're watching The Last Word, coming to you live from the Nation Center here at NTV.
This is The Last Word.
Welcome back. You're watching The Last Word on NTV. Our hashtag tonight is The Last Word NTV, and we are live on NTV, of course, and on all our digital platforms: YouTube NTV Kenya, X at NTV Kenya, Facebook is NTV Kenya, Instagram is at NTV Kenya. And our last word tonight is we're seeking to understand or to just answer the question: Has there been an impact of the Gen Z protest since June last year, 1 year on? Very many people are sharing their views, and we'd like to hear from you as well. Brenda Kalula on Facebook says, the protests have brought change in that as Kenyans, we are more involved in matters our country. We now know we can have a better country. We have also known that Kenya has money, unlike this government was saying when it came to power. Dennis Zuki says, there's no change actually. It's worse. While Davey says, no change so far, so terrible. We are jumping from frying pan to the fires. Namuel Nyabuti says, nothing has changed. Njeri Wanyamiti says, in a way, the protests were impactful because they made many other Kenyans know that there's a generation that does not fear anything. What do you think? Has there been an impact? Has there been no impact? You can post your comments on all our digital platforms. Sharon,
right.
What do you think?
I want to look at this from a development perspective because as a nation, our shared aspiration is to have a prosperous country, a prosperous nation where most people, if not all of us actually, have their basic needs met and are able to say, you know, my dignity as a citizen is preserved. It's at the center of governance in this country. Now, let's look at it, the impact from an economic perspective. And immediately, there was a projection by the National Treasury for 2024 that the GDP growth would be closer to 5.5 to 5.7%. And then after the protest, the World Bank and our very own Kenya National Bureau of Statistics then showed a revised growth of 4.7% for 2024, showing that there was a decline in the state of our economy. Now, some would say this was attributed not just to the protest, but that was what the National Treasury alluded to as one of the reasons for the decline in the growth of our GDP. But also there were other factors, including climate shocks like floods, which affected the country last year. But further from this, some people would say there always would be a cost that is associated with change, that when you're going to the streets to protest, there's a system of governance that, you know, this movement is trying to overhaul, and one of which is how we drive our economy, how our policies for change, our policies for inclusivity and the wellness of our people are done in this country. But away from the economic status and what happened then, of course, we also saw a lot of destruction of property and the tragic loss of lives. But I would say also the development of a country includes the voice of the people, the social contract between the state and the citizens that it governs, okay? And what the underlying message has been all along is that we need a complete overhaul of this contract. And one of the impacts, I would say, is that there has been an expansion of the civic space. This protest forced an undeniable conversation you know, between the government and the people of how this country is governed. You know, it forced the people, we can say that it's not business as usual. Immediately after the protest, we saw President Ruto coming and speaking very harshly on the day, the night of June 2024, but this changed afterwards. There was a complete, you know, overhaul of the cabinet, and a lot of change after that. But also that right now, it is not business as usual. The young generation, Generation Z, are not taking things as they come. When you are putting out the budgets, the policies and everything, we are reading the documents. We saw even on social media when the country was interrogating the finance bill of 2024, some citizens took it upon themselves to translate the overarching issues into various languages. So even civic education expanded in that space. More and more Kenyans are interested in participating in the governance of the country. And I think that is a positive impact, isn't it?
And there's a context to that. I mean, remember, this is literally, and Zaha will confirm this, but this is literally the most educated group of young people in terms of size, because if you look at the people that we are talking about, a lot of them benefited from the free primary education that went all the way up to Form 4. So 8 out of 10 Gen Zs that we are talking about have that post-secondary to post-secondary education. That is really important because it means then they can understand things at a different level. They can have debates that are often difficult to have. They are on social media. This is a generation that is digital native. They have been born in a world, they've never known a world without the internet, and therefore the spaces for expression, political expression, social expression, all kinds of expression have been opened up by the sheer fact of the digital affordances that we are talking about. So right now, the government official will say something and they will not wait for 3 weeks for someone to write a letter to the editor to protest. It will be real time. So someone will, before they finish, that clip will be circulating everywhere and people are going to be calling them out. And we've seen that, for example, with CS Murkomen about his shoot to kill order. Immediately that went out, we have seen people going after him and say, what is this that you are saying? And I don't think that it is a comfortable place for even the government to be where everything you do is under scrutiny. And I think there is need to characterize that as change, simply because the right to express oneself, this whole freedom of expression that we talk a lot about, it is a guarantor of all the other rights. Because if you can't speak out, then it means anything can happen to you. So I think to the extent that those protests have helped to open up this space, and in a sense, more people are speaking about more things, some of them that even have nothing to do with this. I think that is an interesting thing that we talk about. But for me, the one thing that I have to say is that the question has to come, what do we do with all of these things? So if we have seen many reds here, and there's an explanation to those reds, I think, because the movement started, but I don't think that it was thought through to the end. That is why, at a certain point, we wake up and there's a broad-based government, because the government, I think, saw this, that there isn't a strategy around how this group was going to engage with the power and basically take over power in a way that then would allow them to implement the things that you're talking about. So the real questions will be whether those young people, and this is gratifying actually to see that a lot of people even in our audiences are running, but to see whether they will engage with acquisition of IDs, registering as voters, waking up on that day to go and actually vote someone in or someone out. That, I think, is going to be...
It's going to be practical.
Yeah. No, Zaha wants to say something.
That's the generational gap.
Well, in our intergenerational corner
yes,
here.
we have to speak here.
Well, I think there's something we young people are learning very quickly, and is that an organized minority is a political majority. And so we are overworking and reworking. And one thing that, you know, again, for our parents and the older generations, since we are so occupied with the digital experiences, apart from just us necessarily pushing for the protest, there's been a lot of civic education that has been happening digitally. We're talking about millions of X spaces being accorded to Instagram lives. Not only was the finance bill changed into different languages, we had people creating whole chat GPTs to, you know, to break down the constitution. And I think that's the same thing we're going to do to push for not only young people to vibe, but also us to participate in that process, but also not just vote, but also stay there and protect the vote, because we know you guys a bit too much. I think it's just a gradual change that is coming, and the essence of accountability in our generation has greatly risen, and that is cause for alarm, and the government should be scared. They should really panic. It's giving panic.
Before Smart comes on, I'd like to ask you, Zaha, June last year, what did you see? What did you see as, you know, going to be a result of the manner that you're participating in so passionately?
Well, for me...
If we went back into Zaha June 2024, take me to Zaha June 2025.
You know, now the difference is that in both of them, I was a treasonous protester, as per what we were called. But in this regard, I think at that time, I was still in the front line of wanting change in a country that I believed change is very much near. I was still in the front lines of thinking the reason as to why I'm in the streets is because not only do I deserve better, but I have not been raised in a bystander effect whereby everything that is happening for every other person does not affect me. It's a fact that I go to a university that does not necessarily is not in one tribal scope. I have met all Kenyans of all dimensions, and their issues are my issues, even though we are so different. And so when I took to the streets that day, I went to ask for my country back. I went to ask for my safety. I went to ask for accountability of my taxes, even though they are nil returns, but I needed to see where it's going.
Did you see, were you seeing as, in June last year, were you foreseeing that you'd be back on the streets in June this year?
Yes, we had already encouraged ourselves that we will be there until change actually happens. And the brotherhood and sisterhood that has been there within the Gen Z movement is worth going to the protest. It was music, it was art, it was memes. It was the one place I thought if I'd go, I'd meet people who wouldn't necessarily look at me, and not only as a fellow Kenyan, but as a very deserving sibling. And so for me, I went back. We knew we were going back, and I think everyone was motivated to actually go. Koinange Street was a space for music. We had people in their bikes calling out DJs and stuff like that. It was a unification of souls of young people beyond tribe, beyond class, beyond capitalism at large.
I think someone wrote that, or feminists said, that Kenya is a cruel marriage. We should talk divorce. They just didn't know that it's going to be, the divorce proceedings would be this violent.
Yes.
And I think that...
You should ask where he is now, but...
And what he's doing.
And what he's doing, yes. He's trying very much to pull back everything he had said before. But the point, I think, is this, that there are several things happening at the same time. That one, there is this absolute demand that there is change, and change should come tomorrow. I like to commit to all of us that that's unreasonable, right? There's a whole progress that needs to be done. There's between 1799, when the Parisian going to the Bastille, to the Napoleon Bonaparte getting to office, there's a 10 years period. It takes time, all right? It takes time to do meaningful things. It takes time to achieve change. But also there's a question of what we imagine violence is. So there's violence on the streets, there's burning of buildings, there's beating of protesters, rubber bullets or real bullets. But there's also another face of violence, and this is the violence living in a country where a child born today is going to wake up to no food, and they'll end up malnourished. Millions of children face that reality in this country today. The violence of living in a house that doesn't look like a house, all right? It is tin corroborated, mud thatched, no water. That is violence, all right? So there are things that we have to agree as a people, as a nation, that that's not our portion. That is not the words of a national anthem. There is no plenty within our borders. And that conflict of making sure that there's plenty within our borders is a friction between the citizens getting as much as possible away from the political class. That it should not be right that when someone is elected a governor, all of a sudden they become the richest person in the world, all right? They can have choppers, they can build homes, all of a sudden they own buildings. In this country, the people who are billionaires are politicians. They don't invent anything. They run no industries. That is absurd. And that is the question that we are trying. So the friction of making sure that these individuals don't take that much of our resource because it's meant for our children, meant for our hospital, meant for our housing, meant for education, it will be a serious friction that will take time. They will not relent easily. And I think that consciousness in the public is what is happening now. And it will take time before we finally realize that the money that the politicians give you is your money, not their money. They don't produce money. It is your money. And that conflict is going to take time. And as we try to wrap up on this question of, has there been change? Is it meaningful? We have to adopt a view that it will be, as Joe would like to say, there were generations before that started this fight. And perhaps, as we hope, that the generation past Zaha will not have to fight. Right. That, I think, should be the prayer.
Right.
But the kids born today shouldn't be going to the streets.
Yes.
It will be a serious misnomer if that were to happen.
Interesting how when you talk about previous generations, then...
And I think, James, you brought up an important aspect of that change takes time. And I was listening to one young person who was speaking to one of the TV stations, and there's this question that has been posed to the Gen Z over and over again. What was your plan? When you are leaderless like this, what is the strategy? What is the end game? And this young person said, you know, sometimes a plan, even if it's a bad plan, is better than no plan at all. You know, that we are starting somewhere. We, at the core of this, want to be heard, want to be seen, and want the government to know that, you know, power belongs to us. We have surrendered it to you by constitutionally on representative terms, which at this point, many are feeling not represented. You know, the voices that are in both houses of parliament seem to be holding brief for the executive. So where do you go when your voice is not represented? So when this is a start, maybe a start is better than no start at all from that perspective.
Right. Can I get very quick views before we went on? Gentlemen, your name and your points. 30 seconds, very quickly.
My name is Javan Olo, aspirant Musanda Ward 2027. So me, one thing that I will say, there is no change. I think we're having a government where is playing a cat and mouse game with the youths. Why am I saying this? We're having a government that runs a government like a WhatsApp group. Why do I say this? Is where an admin, if you are not saying, if you are maybe you're airing your views and admin does not want you, he kicks you out. So the government waits for us. The government waits for us, like when you are trying to correct something, they try to abduct you and eliminate you out of the way. So when we come to the streets and air our views, they pretend that they have heard us. And then the same people that they reshuffle in the same government, tell me how all CS will come and say, when somebody, a civilian, approaches a station, shoot to kill.
All right.
We are not having a generation. Please, let's have a conversation, Gen Zs. Thank you.
A rogue WhatsApp admin. Yes, gentlemen.
Okay, I'm Godfrey Omo. Yeah. And I want to say there are several changes we've witnessed. Number one, the fear has been transferred from the protesters to the police officer. We've seen the police brutality is reducing day by day because the Gen Zs are out, and wherever a person is brutalized by the police, we'll expose them, and they will be held individually responsible. Number two, the fear has also gone to the political class. Previously, the political class was seen as a shit, but today, the political class can see electors as important people, unlike previously. So I think today we've seen them grouping together, teaming up, just to save each other against the wrath of the youth of this republic. And I want to encourage all the youth that let's keep on pushing, let's push until we achieve whatever we are looking for. Thank you.
All right, the lady at the corner.
And I can say that there is no change at all in this government. Reason being, looking at the way our former deputy president, how he was kicked out of his seat, was something that shows that MCA has power more than the deputy president.
The MCA has more powers than yes, they just must be meaning to speak. Yes, quickly.
Is that why a lot of the MCAs?
Everyone, the MCAs have power.
I agree.
The people have realized MCAs have power. Yes.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Farajo Mumia, an aspirant Kware Ward in Bakassi South. I want to say that there is no big change because people in the community are still suffering. There is more extrajudicial killing. There is more corruption in the county level and national level. So for us youth, we have to unite so that we can take leadership in this country. Thank you.
Thanks. Yes.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Vincent Machoka, and I wish to say the problem that as a person, as the next member of parliament from Nyeribari Church, I will urge my colleague.
Are you the sitting or the standing member?
I'll be the next member of parliament.
No, okay, so you're the standing member right now.
Yeah. What I want as the young people to do is because, and I'm sure the journalists and the media stations know this, the biggest problem of this country lies in this National Assembly and the Senate. Those are the people with the biggest power in the Constitution to save us from corruption. They're the people who are supposed to call to order everyone, judiciary, DCI, EACC, everyone, because we have mandated our responsibility to them. But what do our MPs do? They submit to the powers that be. If I am elected, for example, I will want my colleagues, the MPs that we are going to be elected with in 2027, we should understand our role as the MPs and implement the Constitution as MPs, because we are the people mandated by the Constitution to even impeach the president if needed.
I wish you all the best. 30 seconds.
My name is Buta Otieno,
yes.
an MCA, aspiring MCA from Homa Bay County. So the reason as to why I'm saying there's no change, first and foremost, what brought this demonstration was high cost of living, unemployment, and good governance, then justice. So since the agencies came out for these things, there's no change that has taken place. Why? There's still injustices and like abductions which are going on. There's no good governance. We have incompetent leaders, which is bringing this country down. And that is what we are standing up against, and that's the changes that some of the changes that we need to take place so that we can have a good country, a country that can produce fruitful food, and a country that can create employment for the youths.
Okay.
Not to recycle the old leaders.
All right. Okay. Yes, you grab the microphone. I hope you have something really poignant to say.
Thank you. My name is Emmanuel Kioko, an aspirant for Member of Parliament, Kitwist constituency, come 2027. Now, I would say there have been no change because what we went for the streets for was for security and safety of Kenyans. But now you find that when you are abducted, you are being killed even in police stations. You know, and then they say you hit your head in the wall. So, you know, these are the things that continue to make us more angry. And my friend there said, you know, the role of members of parliament. Let me use Kiswahili. Sasa mimi ni mwenye ng'ombe. Alafu naajiri mfanyakazi aenda nichungie hiyo ng'ombe. So in this analogy, mwenye ng'ombe ni mimi mwenye nchi. Mchungaji ni member of parliament. Alafu ng'ombe yenyewe
Linchi.
Now, the member of parliament, now, anapea raisi, you know, anaachilia, you know, shamba zinakuliwa, blah, blah, blah. So, it is, you know, as much as we are fighting the top seat, there is a problem with these members of parliament because they are the ones allowing huyo mtu kutunyanyasa. So, it's a whole system, overhaul, kumaliza wote. Thank you very much.
Wachungaji waende home. Yes.
Thank you. I go by the name Benson Munene, an aspiring member of County Assembly, Dadora 13. What I would say, let us try to know the definition of the change. Because economically, we have seen the change that we are talking about. Before all this that has happened since 2024, I used to buy mkate at 45 bob. Nowadays, I think we are buying it at 80, of which I can't afford. Nowadays, I normally buy a mandazi of 5 bob. So we need to think on that perspective, because economically, we have sabotaged our country.
Okay.
When we come back to matters of leadership, they have just went ahead and blackmailed us. I think it's our high time as young people to go for these positions. We make the change that will impact in this nation.
All right. The lady, are you vying for a seat? All right.
we've seen is this is a country that we have to go to streets so that the government can hear us. We've seen doctors, we've seen teachers, we've seen Gen Zs for the government to hear us. So we are urging the government. We've seen last Mandamano, they used the razor's wire to protect the parliament and to protect the state house. They could have used the same wire to protect the businesses around the town and also maybe policemen around every shop. Yani nasema wangetumia askari wawaeke kila duka ya mwenye inchi for them to identify the goons. If there is protection, then they can identify the goons easily from protesters, and also they could also guide the protesters, because we were going to remember the fallen heroes who died last year. So we think the government could have escorted us for the peaceful demonstration, and maybe it could have ended earlier, and then we go back at home. Yeah, thank you.
All right, look, we can all have the last word, but unfortunately, it's not possible for us to have the last word. But I'm sure your views have been represented. All right? The conversation doesn't end here. It continues.
All right. I think it really is great that we have many people here who want to run for one thing or other. But now to the last word. This really is interesting. We have seen many reds, we've seen many greens. And typically, when you're talking about light, if you mix a green light with a red light, you get a bright yellow. You can try that at home. That means there is hope at the end of the tunnel. But you can also mix red and green if you just take a red color something, and you'll get brown, which is muddy brown. So it means that we have a bright light at the end of the tunnel, but we also have a murky situation here. That is what is coming through in this conversation. But there's one thing I think that we can agree on, that we have even seen here, that this whole Gen Z protests have actually led to more conversation in the country. People are talking. And we did some homework to just see, took a slice of that whole space where people communicate, and we found some interesting results. First, starting with how the word public participation has jumped. We took an analysis of X, and we found that before and after this June 2024, there has been an exponential jump in the use of the word participation. In fact, when we talk about Kenya and compare it with other countries in the world, we really are talking about something, or there we are. So this one is the tribeless dream, one of the other things that we are tracking, which is to say that since that time, public participation, since that time, tribeless Kenyan have gained prominence. Now that means that there is more conversation, but also more conversation about the right things in the right direction. Many of you will recall that in this country, around election time, when it comes to political questions, we've always talked about ethnicity and those sorts of things. So what is at the end of that tunnel that we talked about? That the young people will need to do more than go to the streets. That's the verdict, and that's why a lot of them are running for positions as we see. How will they engage with ID cards? How will they engage with registering to vote? How will they engage with waking up on that day and going to vote? So we can say that the last one on this matter is yes, but, because there's a lot of work that needs to be done. Thank you very much, and thanks for watching The Last Word. You can continue engaging. The Last Word NTV is what we are using on all our social media platforms. And remember that we'll be here every Tuesday night on this, this generational corner. Zaha Indimuli, James Smart, Sharon Mamani, and Eric Latif. That's The Last Word. You have a good night.
This is NTV.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I would like to make you unstoppable. And how would you do that?
And at the Nation Media Group, we are plugging you to the biggest event in the 254. This year marks 10 years of the World Youth Skills Day. We are here to bring you skills that are here to help you navigate through your career. Tip number 1. This is where
Checky. Tafuta skills. Tafuta skills.
As if that is not enough, tip number 2. All matters finance.